It's the Digital Babble with your host, Flipper. Colorful commentary on your photography. Seen on fingerlakes1.com.
Hey, everybody. It's me, Flipper, here on the Digital Babble. And the Digital Babble is a show about photography and Photoshop and different techniques that you can do with both. And it's educational and hopefully entertaining all at the same time. We're on every Wednesday night here on fingerlakes1.com and fingerlakes1.tv. You can also go check out our website at tdbny.com, which is where all our show postings and any articles that I write about photography, how-tos, anything that I kind of deem as something that I think you as a listener or viewer is going to enjoy. I'll start posting more how-to articles and stuff in the near future, especially now that it's getting nice out. I can get out there and actually go shoot some things and not have to worry about, snow and cold and all that wonderful stuff. So, spring's in the air. And boy, is spring in the air. If you're getting ready to start doing some macro photography, get ready because a lot of macro subjects are coming out right now. You got tulips that are going to be in bloom here any second. I know our tulips are right there, nice and tall. So get those cameras out, get them ready, and start taking flower photography here very quickly. So that's my tip for the day, I guess. This week's show is all going to be about action photos. So sports action. So for all you parents out there, or even if you're not parents and you just like a different sport or different types of sports, and you want to take photos at these sporting events, a lot of cameras have a setting called action. And those action scenes and that setting on the camera can do a ton of stuff. What it does is there's a lot of settings that it changes to make it so that you can just pull up and fire that camera and try to get those action shots. So I'm going to expand the segment just a little bit this week because with action photography comes some different types of physical techniques with your body to help you get the best action shots or sports shots that you can get. But if you're going to be out shooting a sport, this is a great setting to use. Compared to the full auto mode, it definitely sets the camera up to think more like you or as a professional photographer might for sports shots or action shots. Good example of action shots. Football players running up a field. You're following the football player who's carrying the ball. As they're coming up, you're firing away. Bang, 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 bang. And, you get a bunch of shots. And then one of them is your keeper, or a couple of them are your keepers. Okay, so in the mind of a professional photographer, there might be the process or the thought process going on is, I'm going to need a higher ISO. I'm going to need a faster shutter speed. And I don't care so much about the aperture. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But I want to make sure that whatever light I have available, I'm going to get the best exposure to freeze the action of the player. But I don't care so much about freezing the action of everything else around the player. You want to capture that one moment in time. Great example of a great sports pick is the collision between, like saying, a football player carrying the ball and the opposing team coming in to tackle him. When they collide, that is an apex moment where you're going to be wanting to take as many photos as possible. And usually that's great because in the sports mode or the action mode, the camera thinks like the following. In the action mode, it does set the higher ISO, more so than auto or any of the other modes. So it does pump up the ISO. So hopefully you don't need as much light to capture the scene in front of you. It sets the exposure with the shutter as a priority. In other words, it's going to set the shutter as your priority at a higher shutter speed. So like 1/200th of a second, 1/160th of a second, 1/500th of a second. It's going to be faster, so hopefully you can freeze the action right there as it happens. Okay? Autofocusing changes from autofocus one time and then fire the shot to continuously autofocus, and hopefully it's going to track as this person's coming into the scene and moving across the camera. It's going to track and focus them no matter where they go and what they do. So the autofocus will continually readjust what your subject is doing. And then, of course, you're going to get the multiple bursts. You're going to get the burst firing or burst shooting of your camera. So if you got a camera that can do 3.5 second or 3.5 frames per second, it's going to fire 3.5 frames every second. So you pull the trigger once, so you're following the action, and it's focusing on the player, and it's chink 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 chink, and you're just taking the photos as they come. That is the beauty of the action or the sports dial, the scene selection mode. Now, one of the best techniques I can give you to help you get the best out of your action photography is there's two things. Okay, one, get as close as you can to your subject. The further away you are, the less action it looks like. It looks like you're just taking a wide angle scene of the entire field. If you're too far back, you're just capturing everything, and really having a high ISO and a high shutter is not necessarily needed for that. What you want to do is get as close as you can, and you want to zoom as close as you can, filling that entire region or that entire frame with the action. Like that previous example of the two football players, one carrying the ball going downfield, and then the opposing team going to tackle. When they get right about here, you're probably going to want to fill that frame with just those two players, and then as you're firing or burst firing, it's going to snap, 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 and then you caught the action of the moment. One of those shots are probably going to be phenomenal. I hope that's phenomenal. I mean, that's the way I am. Sometimes you got to shoot and pray a little bit, but having the best timing and looking for where the shots are is really key to getting some really great sports and action photography. Apex to the climax. You're looking for those climatic situations, the scenes. Like saying if player A is a basketball player that has the ball and he's going up or she's going up for the shot, and then the other person's going up to block it. Right there is the start of the climax. And then when the ball leaves the hand or when the person stuffs the other person, that's a climatic scenario. I mean, that's where you want to start shooting and shoot through all of it. And that's what is great about the action scene on your camera. It's absolutely great because, like I said, that burst fire, the higher ISO, shutter priority really makes a great way for you to just fire away and hopefully get the exact shot you're looking for. Now, so technique one, find your apex, find your climax to, the action. If the action happens like in motorsports, their action's it's constant. So you're going to have action the entire time that they're traveling around the track, depending on what happens, who's passing who, so on and so forth. So you have less of a climatical situation. You're not going to see like some climax. But if you keep on the action and watch as people are passing and have your camera at the ready, you might capture a great pass, or maybe somebody collides into somebody else and you take photos of the accident as it happens. And those are some really great sports picks as well, especially when you got somebody who just, took a wrong turn, Clyde, and took somebody else out. We're not looking for that as, there's scruples behind that, I suppose, but that's really where the climax is. So that's technique one. Anticipate your climax. Technique two, I'm going to borrow my dummy here, my little wood guy, okay, and I'm going to just basically hold him up here. So saying if the action is happening out there in the camera land, we're going to pull up the camera. So pretend like he's holding a camera here. I know I can't bend him the way I need to. Okay, so the action starts over here, and as everything's happening and the subject's coming crossed, you're going to turn your body and keep on that subject. And what you want to do though is you want to plant your feet in the best position, so all you're turning is your waist. You want to start here, and then when you turn, you're turning just the waist part. Of course, my little mannequin guy is not cooperating, but that's really key, and I'll tell you why it's really key. When you're out taking photos of action shots, you don't want to have to replant your feet or change, because A lot of times what will happen is that your brain tells the feet to move at the same time your arms want to move at the same time to kind of move and kind of shift around. If you just move with your waist, you're never putting that brain wave into the hands to say drop the camera. And that was one of the best techniques I got from a really good friend of mine whose name eludes me now. Matt, I can't think of his last name, but anyway, he was a great photographer, great sports photographer. And he taught me that with taking sports pics, because what'll happen is if you're moving your waist, you're not dropping your hands. That's number one. Number two, if you're moving fast enough with the action, a lot of times the background will blur out like motion blur, so it looks like the camera was moving. But if you're smooth enough and at the right speed, when you come across, the camera will capture that subject perfectly clear and nice and sharp. And that is the best technique I can give you. So those two things: anticipate the climax and turn with your hips. In other words, follow the action with your hips. Plant your feet, like saying if you're watching football, if it's happening in front of you, you're going to plant your feet square to the field, and you're going to start over here, and as they run by you, it's going to be snap, 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 and you never really replant your feet. Now, does that mean that you can't ever replant your feet? No, that's not the case. But that is one of the best tips I can give you, especially when you got something coming by you or coming across the film plane, is follow it with your hips, and never put that thought in your head to replant your feet, because like I said, a lot of times when people think replant your feet, you're moving your arms as well, which then could tilt the camera out of access. You could drop it completely, then have to pull back up. You pull your finger off the shutter, so on and so forth. So those are two great techniques for action shots. Also, some really good tips to try to abide by. I know not everybody has an external flash, but if you have an external flash, or if you go buy one, pop it onto your camera. It'll give you a little more power, and just let it fire automatically as the subjects come by. And what'll happen is that flash, and I'm not talking the one on the camera, because that could get really weird and it doesn't look right, but an external flash giving you more power, it will help you freeze the action as it happens, as it comes by your camera. And it just gives a little bit of fill light, so that the shadows in the face, like saying if you're inside the helmet, a lot of times it's very shadowy in there, it might fill that in so you can see the person's expression as the football player's running down the field or hitting somebody else or whatever. So using a flash is definitely a good tip if you have the opportunity to use a flash. If you have a camera that's powerful enough to capture the scene as is, by all means, go ahead and do it. So let's see. I kind of lost my place in my notes here. Okay, so why is this good? Why is the sports scene so good? Again, I'm going to reiterate. The high ISO means you can freeze the action or freeze your subject. Multiple shots. In other words, when it flips over to taking burst shots, it gives you multiple shots of the action as it happens. So you don't have to be exactly timed to the climax. You can take a few shots before, during, and after. And saying if you take a 5-shot window, you might end up with some really amazing shots. Which is also a great way to maximize your chances of getting a great shot, or a good shot, or just the shot you were looking for. Autofocus and auto tracking, where it's constantly refocusing instead of one-time focus. That's really great, because as you come by the action's coming by you. It might be changing plane as it moves through the field. That autofocus will automatically readjust at wherever that subject is and going, and making that very possible for you to get that climax situation no matter where it is on the field or where it is on the track or whatever. The other thing is with the shutter speed priority, keeping that shutter speed as high as it can with the available light, plus adding in a external flash, is going to give you the best possibility to freeze the action and get those shots that you're looking for at your sporting event. I find sports photography very rewarding when it's a sport I enjoy. One of the sports I do enjoy is a little bit of motor racing. I don't like a lot. I like the old dirt tracks a little bit, but I got to tell you, the first time I ever got a chance to shoot with my really good photography friend, Mike Scataglia, he's an amazing guy, got me into the middle of the track, and I freaked out because I'm not used to being in the middle of the track and watching everything go around, because if something goes wrong, you're right there. It's less likely that they'll come into the middle of the track, but it's still kind of scary if some big motor vehicle comes at you or whatever, you're ducking out of the way. So there's some excitement there too, but really that's not for me. I'm more like, I guess I would rather be in the stands or up on an eagle's nest or something, taking shots that way, or on a wall someplace. It's just someplace where I feel a little more safer. Now, football games, I don't mind taking football games. I'm not the biggest fan of football. I know, boo, 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 I know. I actually enjoy soccer a lot more, and hockey. I would love to be shooting hockey, but I don't know where we can get too many hockey games around where I live, so without going too far. Soccer, on the other hand, it's coming up to that season where soccer is going to be big for a little while, and then we'll get into the summer and that'll fade away as well. Baseball can be very, very fun to photograph, especially if you're not quite in the outfield, but you've got a really good view of the batter, because sometimes the batting is amazing to watch what happens when you have a fast shutter speed, but yet the ball's moving and the bat's moving. So you get the action of those two things blurred out, but the player's nice and perfectly still. It really gives a story to it. Also, people running the bases, the people catching the balls and throwing the balls. There's a lot to that. Another great sport, little more calm, golf. Golf pictures are kind of fun and interesting, especially if you get to a different angle of view. You get down on the ground and you're looking up with a not so much a wide angle lens, but a wider angle lens, and you got the ball down here, and you're looking up kind of like a tall pitcher, looking up at that golfer, and as the club comes through, you're taking the shot, and you get the kind of motion blur of the club as it strikes that ball, and it's taken off like a shot. And to see the entire mechanics of that is just an amazing kind of scenario as well. Now, why is the action scene bad? What are the downfalls? What are the pitfalls? You do lose a little bit of creative control over the shot. You're not setting what you think is the proper shutter speed. Artistically, what you think is the right ISO or aperture. The metering is usually set to spot metering. So in the center of the lens or the center of the viewfinder is where it's going to grab the metering. So it's going to be one of those situations where you're going to want to make sure that whatever you're shooting at, make sure it's in the center of the scene at first. That way it gets the initial exposure and gets it right. The other thing with the exposure too is that if you have multiple subjects, you're going to with spot metering, what the problem is spot metering is such a small area in the middle of the frame. It's just a small little 10% of the frame right in the middle, or maybe 5% of the frame right in the middle. And that's what it's metering off of. So if you have something really, really bright in the background, or really, really bright coming from one side or the other, it might look a little funky because you're metering that player and not the entire scene. So that's something to keep in mind. Multiple shots don't always get the result, but significantly increases your chances. So that's kind of a pro and con at the same time. One of the biggest things with that is, shooting multiple shots does increase your chances, but is not a guarantee that you're going to get it. So there you go. That's my thoughts on how the camera works and how the sports action works. A few techniques. I have some good examples here. Let's get over to the little slide view here, I guess you could call it. And this is your basic camera. Of course, you can set your mode dial to action by turning the mode dial to wherever you need to put it. And here's a mode dial that shows you the little action dude, which is the little running man. So you're going to turn it over to that particular setting, and that'll be your action scene. Now here, I wanted to show a burst of shots, and of course, my favorite mascot for all my podcast and video shows is my favorite boy, Oscar. He's just a big ham. And what I did was I set it to action mode, and I didn't quite have enough light, but it did an all right job. It demonstrates what happens. So it fired, I think, 12 shots, and I took every other shot, and just to show you the motion between shots. So you can see he's looking right at the camera, kind of getting up, sniffing at it. Then he backs up, then he looks away, and he looks a little further away, looks away a little more, and then he comes back up and gets a very nice kind of portrait. That's almost like a portrait shot right there. So that's where multiple shots come in. It increases your chance that someplace in that series you've got a really, really good shot. And I think I got 2 out of that series, actually. I think the middle top one and the bottom right one are fairly good shots of Mr. Oscar. So let's see. More examples. Racing shots. I got a lot of racing shots on this show. Mostly because that was kind of the last time I shot sports photography for a while. So right here is we were up at Paradise Speedways. I was with Mikey, and this was first time I ever got on the inside of the track to actually have some fun shooting really up close and personal with these motor vehicles. So this shot was really amazing. I mean, some of these bikers on dirt tracks, I gotta say, they're amazing people. But here's some things that are telltale signs about action shots, action photography. You're scrolling with the shot, so the background blurs, okay, like a motion blur. But that guy or that motor vehicle or the motorcycle is in perfect focus or pretty close to being perfectly focused. When you're shooting like a ball coming by the scene, if you shoot it, the background's blurred out totally, but the ball is like perfectly sharp or pretty darn close to being perfectly sharp. And let's get another one here. Here's another racing one. I thought this one was fun. Little go-karts going around. They were fun to watch because, I don't know how they went on the dirt, but boy, they were just fun to watch. Little gas-powered go-karts. Again, you can see the background is blurred, but the car, the numbers, the letters, the helmet is all perfectly in focus, and that's how you get that scenario. This is straight out of the camera too. Here's a bigger vehicle. This is why I was getting nervous. These are quite a bit bigger. They're quite a bit heavier. They're quite a bit louder. It kind of started freaking me out a little bit. But there again, you can see in the tires the motion blur because the tires are spinning and moving faster than the shutter speed can freeze the action. So there's some really great examples of sports photography, some really great examples of telltale signs of sports photography. I did have another racing multi-frame, but it didn't come out right when I tried to stitch it together, so it just didn't look right because I think the way it took the frames. But that is some of the best things that you can get out of your sports or action scene shots. So now, as you know, every show I usually do a little bit on photography. So there's my photography section. I've now got about 20 some minutes left. I usually go into Photoshop and I do some different techniques in Photoshop. So we're going to pop into Photoshop here in just a second. But what I wanted to explain was, I think what I'm going to focus on this time in Photoshop is the fact that you can create the same effects as sports photographies and action photography through Photoshop, through techniques where it gives you kind of that feel of sports photography, but you really didn't shoot it that way. Maybe you shot it too fast. It was too high of a shutter speed, so everything's frozen, including the background. So it lacks that excitement, that motion, that movement. You can repair that. Now, is that lying? I suppose it is. I mean, a lot of people don't like Photoshop because, you're doing something to it. Well, there are reasons to do things in Photoshop. And I really think saving a shot that was a perfect moment in time, but it froze everything instead of getting the action or getting feel for the action, you can really liven up some really great photos through Photoshop with some of these techniques. So I'm going to pop over to the first image. So let me slide a little closer here to the keyboard so I'm ready to go. So this is the first image. I think you saw it as an example earlier, and this is a really great image. You can see in the background here the background's somewhat blurred, so it gives it that sense of motion. The tires are blurred, gives it really that sense of motion. I'm leading the way I took the shot. You're leading the photo, so you can see that you have a little more white space out this way or empty space over this way, and your subject is coming in the direction. They're coming into the frame instead of exiting the frame. So it kind of brings your eye in, and I think what it really does a really great job of too is if we divide this into thirds, you'll notice that the driver's helmet is right on a third, a third intersection, which gives it kind of a compositional power. Really gives us some excitement there. So what do I want to do with this photo? Well, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to tone it a little differently. I don't like how washed out it looks. It looks semi-washed out to me. The other thing is I think I'm going to enhance the blur just a touch, just so that we can give it a little more oomph. And what I mean oomph, I mean give it a little bit more action feel. I want to make it feel more exciting than it really is. And then I think also I might just take, and maybe we're going to change the color of the bike a little bit. I don't like that blue. Maybe I want to change it a little different color. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to blur the background even more. So we're going to do a motion blur to make that happen. We're going to then bring back and mask back in the driver. And then I'm going to change the color of the paint. Maybe just change the color of the blues and make the blues, I don't know, reds. I don't know. We'll pick a color when we get there. And then what I'm going to do is make sure that it is more contrast, because I really want to make that driver and that bike stand out. I want the contrast to speak to, just speak to your eyes, to make it so that it really pops off the page. So let's pop over into Photoshop here, which is here's our shot. I'm gonna get in here and we're gonna just fill the page so we can see it properly. You'll notice the histogram up here will show that a lot is right in the mid-tones. We're lacking some stuff up at the highlights end, which is to the far right. Far right, and then we're lacking some information over to the far left, which is the shadows. So what that tells me by looking at this histogram, it's a great exposure and it's easily adjustable. And on top of that, your shadows and your highlights could be easily enhanced to make this photo a little bit more exciting, a little more contrast, just to give it that little extra oomph. So first thing that I think I'm going to do is we're going to get the blur done. And then we're going to do toning, and then we're going to change the color. I think that's the right way to do it. I might be wrong. We might change our mind halfway through this. So to do the blurring, to do the motion blurring, we're going to make a duplicate copy of our background, like so, by just clicking and dragging it down to the new paper icon down here at the bottom. Now you'll see in our layers, we have a background copy, which is now a full-fledged layer. We're going to go up to filter. Whoops, I lost there we go. I'm going to go up to filter, and I'm going to go down to blur, and I'm going to go down to motion blur. Some of these filters are wonderful. If you're following along with Photoshop Elements, it's a great product. It does a lot of these things. You can use Photoshop Elements for a ton of these edits. All right, so motion blur. Right now, let me explain this dialogue. What you're looking at is the motion blur at a 90-degree angle, in other words, vertical. So it's going to take each pixel and make a copy north and south, and so often as it moves away, for so many different pixels. So I got it set to 51 pixels at 90 degrees north and south. Really isn't giving me the effect I'm looking for, because the person wasn't moving, top to bottom. They were moving left to right. So let's change it to 0 and take a look at it. Wow, that really kind of give it, let me move this out of the way a little bit. That really kind of gave it close to what I was looking for. I think I'm going to do just a touch more. I'm going to bring it maybe like maybe 80. 80 sounds good. We're going to really make it dramatic. All right, so I'm happy with my blur. I say, okay, fine. I'm great with it. Maybe I don't like the angle. Remember that 0, 90, 180, whatever, is not the only angles. Maybe I really want a little bit more of like maybe a 2-degree angle upward. So we can bring this down to 2 or 4, or we can set it. So we'll go 2 or 3. or 3. And what that'll do is it'll change the angle that the pixels are blurred in. I think I might actually change this to like a 2, because really the bike and the frame was not perfectly horizontal. I want to get that blur to kind of go off the back of that. So I think I like that blur there. Okay, great. Now we can do this one of two ways. We can either mask everything out and then only bring back the blur, or we can start with the blur and then only bring back the details that we want. In this scenario, I think I'm going to do the latter of those two. I'm going to start a mask and leave it white, and I'm going to get a black brush. So I'm going to grab my brush. It's a little big, so I'm going to shrink it up here just a little bit. You can use the dialogue and use the sliders, but you want a soft brush or somewhat soft brush. I'm going to use the left and right square brackets to change the size of my brush. I'm going to make sure it's black. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the opacity of the blur layer so that I can tell where my guy was. So we're going to come back and bring in this detail right here, like so, and make that tire nice and clean, make the body and the engine and his foot nice and clean, and off the back here get his helmet, and we're going to have to get his arm and stuff, and I'm going to get the tire again here. And as I paint back my mask and I kind of clean this up, I'm going to use the soft edge of the brush to clean up those ghost images off the front, because I don't want to show the front side of the blur so much as the back side. So we'll zoom in here just a little bit. I'm going to switch it back to white because I'm not happy that I kind of got in here or out too far. So we're going to blur that back out just a touch. All right. Now, whoops. Bring it back down. Switch it back to black. I'm going to bring it in nice and tight now and make sure that my edges are nice and clean, and make sure that that is as close to being out of there as possible. All right, get rid of, whoops. Come on, get that. There we go. Get his arm back in here. Get his head back in here. Now we're going to notice that the front side of this person has a little bit too much blur. We're going to do that. Bring this person's back in. Okay, so get the back fender. Whoops. A little too far. Sometimes using a mouse is very difficult. I'll admit that. That's one of the joys of working with Photoshop, is learning how to use the mouse a little better. Sometimes I can get really good at it. Sometimes I got to get the pen out and work. I got a tablet with a pressure pen. If you're really getting into Photoshop and you're really getting into art and stuff, I would definitely recommend getting a pointing device that's a pen. It's pressure sensitive, because it almost gives you the feel like pen and paper or paintbrush and paper, and it really does help speed the process along. So now we have this motion blur just of this guy, and now the background is super blurred. So now I'm going to go back to 100%. So now you can see the blur area. I'm noticing that I'm not quite happy with the blending here too much, because I got like paint marks here. So we're going to back off the opacity and dial in where I'm happy with it. Or you're happy with it. I don't care, wherever you want to be with it. Maybe right about 75%, 70%. 70% is good. That'll be fine. So there we go. So now we've made this picture now where the background's even more blurred out. I'm going to go Control-Alt-Shift-E, and what that's going to do is give me a new layer that's basically rubber stamped. So it doesn't matter what I do to the bottom layers, it's not going to change the picture anymore. So now I have, this is my composite. Okay, I'm ready to work now on some other issues or other things. So now maybe what I want to do is I want to change the well, let's see. Do we want to do tone or color first? Why don't we do color first? We're going to go grab a hue and saturation, and we're going to go just to the blues and see if we can't manipulate the blues by themselves. Yes, I can. Look at that. Color changing bike. All right, we're going to make it fuchsia. And we're going to make it a little more colorful here. We're going to increase the saturation. So now you can shift your color wherever you want to shift your color to. Maybe you want it red, maybe you want it brown, maybe you want it something else. But you can shift your color accordingly. Now maybe you're just like, well, you know, Geez, Flip, I don't think I like the blue or the yellow. Okay, well, let's do both channels. We'll make a fuchsia bike and rider. Then we're gonna go grab the yellows and we'll change and see what we can get with the yellows. Now, granted, we got to be careful. Notice we're changing the background now because the yellow there's a lot of yellow in the background. Maybe we want to make it green. There you go, hot green, and we'll increase the saturation. Oh, that's looking kind of interesting. Not sure. It's kind of like the Joker mobile, I guess. So now that we've made our color adjustments and playing around with it, now what we can do is we can go back into that and start working on the mask. I'm going to go Control I. Once I click on the mask, I'm going to go Control I, which will change it to a black mask. So all our edits are now gone. What I want to do is I want to take in the white brush and take some white color and just paint back those color changes. Wherever I see fit, those color changes need to be. So this is a way you can paint with color instead of just light. Like we talked last week. Last week we talked about painting with light. This week we're going to paint with color. And as you can tell, it doesn't catch all the blues, but it does catch a majority of them. If you want to catch more of the blues, you can always make modifications to the hue and saturation control panel and make those modifications to get what you want out of it. You can expand. Now, let me go back into that and I'll show you. You can expand any one of the color ranges down here. This color range down at the bottom, these little triangles are the feathered color range. And then the lines here in the middle is the definite color range, the hard color range. So any color that sits in here is going to be modified to this color. And that's where you can kind of make adjustments. You can move these sliders in and out. So more color or less color gets affected. The triangles are more of a fuzzy color. And the lines in the middle brick there is more a definite color. So you can move it way over here and you'll notice we'll get some funky color shifts happening. So I think we'll just put it back to where it was or close to where it was. Don't need it as much here. But that's how you can change your colors and grab more color out of the spectrum. And that's how you got to think is what side of the spectrum is it on? Here's yellow, and then one side's this, one side's that. All right, so we've done the color changes. We've made some modifications here. And now what I want to do is make it a little bit more dramatic by getting a little bit more contrast here. Get a little more contrast, a little more toning in here. So what we're going to do is do another adjustment layer, and we're going to do a levels. I'm going to do something very simple. I'm going to grab the darks, and I'm going to pick a dark area that I think is the darkest area on the bike. And I'm going to pick the highlights, and I'm going to figure out where the highlight of the bike is. I think it's probably going to be here. Maybe I want it to be a little more light. Ooh, too light. A little less, a little less, a little less. Oh, we're shifting colors now. All right, go back to this. Yeah, and then what we'll do is we'll just lighten it up by changing the midpoint slider where my midtones are. So that's just too dark, but it's kind of interesting. It's very dramatic looking, but I think I want it just a touch lighter. Maybe I'll bring the highlight slider in manually. Yeah, that might work too. There we go. That's actually pretty close to what I was envisioning. So dark, not real dark background, but nice light surface that they're running on. The colors are changed. The tones are looking good. Let's save this and we'll go compare it. So file, save as a JPEG and save. Okay. And okay. Now let's go back and look at our original. Here's our original. And notice, not as much blur in the background, not as much blur on the track. The colors are still blue and yellow. And let's see what our new one looks like. And here's our new one. A little darker. There's more contrast in the bike and the wheels in the background. And the color shifts here on the green tag and the fuchsia. I'm going to say it's fuchsia bike. And this is some great techniques to play with just to get some, just to have some artistic fun with it. We could put a squirrel running across the road if you want. That could be fun too, but, squirrel dodging race or something. I don't know. But that's definitely some stuff that you could play with. So we got about 7 minutes left. I'm going to try to do one more, I guess. Probably not that one. That one I don't like. This one's kind of neat. This was a really kind of neat photo as they were coming around turn 1 or 2. I can't remember what it would be called. I think it's 2. And this photo really gives me that sense of size, perspective, and distance. But the changes that I think need to happen, and I'm not going to get crazy here. I'm not going to do some real crazy stuff where we're going to change colors or anything. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tone this out, just a regular basic tone out and crop. And we're going to crop it out so it looks better and maybe compositionally looks better, because that'll take us right up to the end of the show. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to crop it. I think what I want to do is I want to make my thirds someplace around here. Notice I can't draw straight. So that's kind of where I want to kind of make this happen. And then I really want to get the contrast, boost the contrast, make sure the midtones stay nice, maybe boost some colors, because there's lots of good colors in here, but it looks like they kind of got washed out a little bit. And then, maybe we could do one other technique. We'll see if we got time, and we'll do another technique. So let's try cropping and toning and contrast. So let's do this up here and go over to Photoshop. Here we are at Photoshop, and first thing I want to do is I really want to work on getting the crop down. Now right now I have my crop to be a full screen on my video, so this might be a little bit weird of a crop, but we're gonna try to do it as best we can here. Notice it gives me the ants, the selection ants here, so I can see my rule of thirds, like I was talking about drawing over there. And I'm going to set this, and I really think that 33 needs to be there, and the pilot the driver needs to be right there. I think that's perfect crop right there. So now it gives it more action, and they're coming into the screen. They're kind of driving by. It looks great. Has a lot of action feel to it. It really looks good. We're going to do a curves adjustment. I'm going to show you curves again because you got to learn them, I guess. And I'm going to pick some place here, either in the engine block. Maybe that's just a touch too dark. Let's go, I think, maybe in the neck of the driver here. It's still got to find my happy. Got to find it. Nope, not happy. There we go. That toned it the way I wanted it. Now we want to make sure that the whites are nice and white. Wow, that's really looking sharp. I think it's just a touch overcooked on our darks here. Let me scroll in and see if we can find that dark area that I'm looking for. Right there, that was one of these areas here. I think it's way up here. There we go, that looks a little better. So our brights are brights, our darks are darks. It even started to pop the colors out. So let's do one more adjustment since we're running out of time. We're going to do one more adjustment here. We're going to do the hue and saturation. And we're going to pop those colors right off the page. I think right around 25% increase. Now you don't want to over boost colors and make them unnatural for every shot, but sometimes some shots really make it nice. And this is one of those shots that I think really makes it nice. So there we go. We cropped it, we toned it, and then we also did some hue and saturation to pop those colors, give it a little more excitement. Let's go File, Save as a JPEG. And hit save again. Okay, I hate that it asks me so many save times here. All right, going back to the original. Here's the original. Uncropped. It's kind of dull. There's not enough contrast. The colors are dulled out. And to the now photo edited one, here it's nice and bright. It's coming into the scene. It's on a third both ways. And the colors pop off the screen, and the dirt looks dirty, and the car looks fast, and it really gives you that kind of sense of urgency and motion and all that wonderful stuff. So I think that's great. I think that worked out really good. So there's a couple photos and different techniques for your action photography. Knowing how to work your camera, I always preach this. Read your camera manual. If you don't have your camera manual, usually you can go right out to the web and grab a PDF version of your camera manual from your camera manufacturer. Always, it's good to know where these settings are. Especially, I'm not saying you got to become a pro. I know I taught a simple class on photography one time, and I always preach that, always go read your manual, because a lot of times camera manufacturers do things just slightly different from each other. So that's one thing I always try to say is read the manual, get a good feel of how your camera works, how your camera manufacturer thinks you think, because me as a photographer might not be able to tell you what to do with just your camera. But you don't have to know everything. But if you're going to do a lot of action shots and a lot of sports photography, maybe your significant other, your wife or your husband is in roller derby. I'm dying to shoot roller derby. I just saw the other day we have a team here from upstate New York that's going around, I think regionally, and they're a wonderful group of females, women that I know from around the community, and I just think it's just phenomenal. I would love to just go to some of their events and just shoot some of their action that's going on, because it just seems like it's exciting. I remember when roller derby was big, back here probably 15 years ago, and you used to turn on the TV and watch a roller derby competition, and people were whipping around the ring and hitting each other and flying over the railing, and the crowd's going nuts. Woo! The photographers in the middle of the ring and outside the ring trying to get all the shots, and just some amazing stuff. And I think that'll be my next sport that I'm going to get into, is roller derby. So that's the thing with action shots, is if you're going to do a lot of action shots and you're going to go to your sons or daughters' sporting events and you want to get the best shots possible, read your camera manual, learn how it sets those things. Take some of the tips off from here. Learn to zoom in and be as close as you can so you don't have to zoom as far. Make sure that you're on the action shot so it gives you the multi-burst and the auto-focusing. Be ready for those climax moments. You pull down for even a brief second, there might be a break in the action. That's why I said when you're following the action, follow with your hips and your shoulders, turn with it, but don't lift the feet, because a lot of times the brain says, oh, the feet are moving, I got to balance myself, so I got to move my arms or drop the camera or something of that nature. So those are some great tips for action photography, and I really wish you the best. I hope everything works out and you guys get some awesome sports photography, action photography. This has been the Digital Babble. I'm Flipper, your host. I'm on every Wednesday night here on fingerlakes1.com and fingerlakes1.tv. It's a show about photography. If you want to give me an email at thedigitalbabble@gmail.com and send in your photos. I'll photo edit up your photos. Even if you just want me to just do a general photo edit show, I'll do a photo edit show on some of your photos. I won't use your name. Your confidentiality is protected as best I can. I won't use your name on air, at least. And please send me your comments, send me your photos. If you want to see a show on a particular thing, let me know. All right. So this is the Digital Babble. We're on every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. I hope to see you next time. I'll catch you on the flip side.
A Flipside Studio production. It's the Digital Babble. Tune in every Wednesday at 7 p.m. on fingerlakes1.com. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter.